Welcome back, everyone, to the SaaS Developer channel. We have a special guest today, Shruti, who is CPO and VP Marketing at Rockset. I've been trying to get her to the show for ages because she has two interesting things to talk about. So it's going to be a two-in-one show. We have good insights on data products from someone who helps customers build them. And then we also have insights from someone who insisted against the trends to build a SaaS first data infrastructure company. So I'm incredibly excited to have Shruti with us.
Thank you so much, Claire. I'm so excited to be here. You're one of the people I look up to on the technical leadership side. So thank you so much for hosting this.
Absolutely. And I'm looking up to you from the product side because it's been really cool to see the success of the product that you're growing. So let's start with data products, which is, we had a video about it a few weeks back. It was a short one, and the main lesson was that it's an incredibly confusing area with a lot of different things being called data products. How do you see it?
That's a great point. Data products, I think people call it data apps, data products, analytical apps. There are so many different names for these things. I see it as something very simple. A data product can either be an internal one for internal consumption, or it can be an external one for your external customers to use it. But at the end of the day, what is it doing? It's taking a bunch of data, it's allowing you to search, aggregate, join, basically analyze that data. And it is different from the old world in one big way, which is it's no longer just humans staring at a dashboard. It's actually programs taking that data and either reacting to it or helping you react to it faster.
Got it. So if, let's say, Datadog would be a data product, for example,
Absolutely, because they've built all of the infrastructure monitoring, and then they're helping you take that data, analyze it, visualize it, but also giving you alerts. And it's coming and tapping you on your shoulder and saying, "Hey, you should go look at this." And that is what a data product does.
is a search engine a data product?
Absolutely. It is taking the data, it's organizing the data in a way that makes it immensely useful for you, in a way that you can consume it, making it very consumable for you and making it very interactive. I think we like to talk about this. If the search engine was a dashboard where you asked it one question and it spun for about 2 minutes to give you an answer, that would not be a data product, but it's so interactive that you're asking it 10 different questions and it keeps coming back and keeping pace with you as you go. That's a data
And it
product.
even auto completes what I'm about to type.
Exactly. It's
So
suggesting.
you're saying that data products, a lot of it is really about real time speed, essentially.
Absolutely. It's very interactive, it's very real time. It's not just a static report that an analyst has built for you. It's much more than that. It's interactive, it's intelligent, it taps you on your shoulder, it tells you what you should be asking, it tells you what you should be doing, and that's a data product.
And a lot of time I talk to different founders, people building products, and I'm hearing something like, well, I don't really know if my product needs to be a data product. What would I even do with the data? Why should I? So maybe if you have a few good examples of maybe expected and maybe some unexpected data products, so to inspire listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I can tell you about a real world example. So, one of our customers, this is an internal one. One of our customers is one of the largest buy now, pay later companies. Those people who tell you pay in four easy installments of $30 each.
Hey, starting yesterday, it could be Apple.
Yes, exactly. But this is one of the leaders in the space, and it's really interesting. They came to us with this problem, which is, imagine they have thousands of merchants, millions of transactions happening, and no matter what they did on their existing infrastructure, what they found was by the time they identified a problem and could go and take action on that problem, it was something like 6 hours too late. And in those 6 hours, they were exposed to so much risk. And why was it taking this much time for them? Not because, they don't have the smartest people in the room. It's one of the best teams I've ever worked with, but because their infrastructure just could not handle being able to take that volume of data and take action that quickly. So when we started working with them, their ask was, can we take action within 2 seconds? And what are these actions, right? It's really interesting. Sometimes it is fraud, if they might catch a fraud pattern. Sometimes it's not even fraud. It could be something like, mentioned Apple. Apple Pay stopped working in West Africa. Something like that, right? Like random stuff happens when you have so many different transactions, and that is an anomaly. As far as they're concerned, these are all anomalies. If there's anything that's an anomaly, they immediately need to be alerted. Something weird going on here, and somebody needs to be tapped on the shoulder to go dig into that, take some action, remediate it as quickly as possible. Very similar to what you said Datadog might do for your infrastructure. These people need a data product internally that is monitoring all of these transactions happening on their platform and providing recommendations, remediations, or alerting the right people immediately. That's a data product, but it's an internal data product in this case, and many, many different teams are using the same data product. Um, it has to be real time, it has to be fast, and it has to be really smart.
You're saying that real time and fast are not exactly the same thing, and I'm a bit curious.
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah. When I say real time, I mean data latency, which is how
Okay.
fresh is your data, right? Are you acting on the most recent data? And then when I say fast, I mean sub-second queries. And the data ingest and the query are two different things. So oftentimes we hear data products where, yeah, real time doesn't matter. I'll give you another example of an internal data product where maybe the real timeness doesn't matter as much, which is one of our investors, Sequoia. And we have a bunch of other VCs that I can't name, but I can name Sequoia because they're kind enough to give us this permission. um, they have all these investor decision apps. So you're a founder. If you go meet VCs, by the way, before they walk into the meeting with you, they have an interactive investor decision app, and they're finding out everything they can about you, about your industry. I guess that's how they come up looking so smart. But
I'm shocked. All these VCs we talked to and nobody said anything.
that's what they do. They're scraping so many different things all the time, and they're bringing all of that together so that the investors have an interactive investor decision app. Before they go into a meeting with a founder, they want to ask a bunch of interactive questions, and they need to know everything they can. So that is one example where they're getting fresh data on a daily, hourly basis. It doesn't have to be a second old. It can be as old as a day old sometimes. But the when I say speed of the interactivity, you know, one of our customers actually said this, one VC said this: if it's any slower than Instagram, no investor will use it.
Yeah, yeah. I was thinking the same thing. Like, I'll use old LinkedIn stuff as an example, but for some of their data products, not all of them, they did offline processing in something like Hadoop, and then they loaded data into a key value store, essentially,
Mhm.
something like Voldemort. And basically, at that point, everything is really fast, right? An application can just do gets, it's sub millisecond, incredible, just caching incredibly fast.
Yes.
So for them, the data was old, but they didn't care. Like if your people you may know is several days old, you will probably
You
not
won't
notice.
care. Exactly. So there are definitely data products where the real time aspect may not be as important, but the interactivity, the
Yes.
speed, the how fast you can ask questions, how fast the answers come back, that is super important. And the problem that we see oftentimes is you have to do so much pre-processing to load it into a key value store and make sure that you can ask the questions you want to ask. And today there's so many different questions your investor might want to ask. You can't even think of them and set your data model. You just can't. So you have to have flexibility to ask these questions.
Yeah. And when you say like sub-second interactivity, it makes me think that if you're building something that is external facing, like your customers will use it, they're probably way more sensitive than if you're doing something that is internal. Like your employees may not leave. Well, in case of Sequoia, they may lose money and get very impatient. But generally speaking, employees have slightly higher tolerance. Your customers have zero tolerance. They can always go and use Instagram.
Exactly. In fact, your employees may not leave, but what they'll end up doing is they'll end up guessing. Because if it takes you 2 minutes to answer one question, you'll answer one question and the rest you'll guess. You won't ask.
No.
That's what they do, right? The remaining, you're not going to ask five questions. Whereas because Google comes back so fast, you ask one question and then you ask five follow-up questions because it's coming back fast. But customers, you're right. And speaking of customers, are we see this a lot. I think SaaS products, especially most SaaS products today, have to show proof of value. And all of
Ooh.
them have some or the other embedded analytics, in app analytics, call it an external data product, call it a user facing analytics use case. But this is where we see all SaaS products are starting to embed something or the other. Rockset also embeds one thing, by the way, in our console.
Yeah, so I was about to ask you if you have examples you can share, but you can definitely share your own example and
Yes.
then maybe some of your customers.
Absolutely. I mean, our own example is clear, right? So, Rockset is a real time analytics database. And what we quickly realized was people are using it in production. Of course, you might use Datadog or Prometheus or something else for monitoring, but they want to see some basic metrics information inside the console. When they log in, they want to see how fresh is my data, what is the data latency, is this collection keeping up, what is my compute utilization, what is my query latency. All of these things we basically show graphs inside Rockset, and it shows you your usage of Rockset, and we're dogfooding Rockset for that. It's all built on our
That's
system.
amazing. So, if you are an infrastructure product, basically showing the usage analytics and performance analytics of your product becomes really important. And we've seen that at Confluent too. Like, I think one of the biggest hits that we released was something that just showed utilization of a cluster. That's it.
Exactly. For all infrastructure SaaS products, that is a big one. And then we see, other examples of external data products. A lot of e-commerce website now have, recommendations and personalizations.
Ooh,
That's such a great example of an external product. And what we typically see is you might build your training model or build your model somewhere on your warehouse, but when you're serving the model, so there's a difference between building your model and serving your model. When you're
yes.
serving your model, you need, again, some real time or some interactive analytics engine, and that's where something like Rockset is often used.
You mentioned the model serving that has to be really fast, and it reminded me of an old use case that I saw people try to build on Kafka, and I always wondered if this is the right infrastructure, and that was IoT.
Hmm.
You have smart devices, they are essentially model servers, and so this is one place where you have to have a lot of data and you have to serve it extremely fast because, as one IoT customer told me repeatedly, if you go into the garage and the light does not turn on, it's a problem. You're
Yeah.
going to notice that.
Yes, IoT is a great example of that. And again, IoT, if you think about all the IoT applications, such a great example of a data application, data product, or data app that's taking an action on your behalf. It's taking all the data, it's seeing, sensing what's happening, and it's taking an action on your behalf. My favorite IoT example is actually the French Coast Guard built a life saving device, and this is actually on Rockset, where they use your geolocation if you're lost at sea. They have this thing that they made you wear, and then they track you down and come find you just by using, tracking on Rockset. They're using all your geo data to go find you. And can't think of a better IoT
So
example
your
where.
device pings the satellites, I guess, and the satellites report data into Rockset, and a bit of managing later, and you find the lost swimmer. That's
For
amazing.
let's see exactly, and that's talk about IoT and how important it is. Like garage light not turning on, important, but can't
Yeah,
find
life.
the person lost at sea. Oh God, life saving, right? So there's so many of these kind of examples for data products that again it's both. I always think of it and break it down into, does the data latency matter, does the query latency matter? And for most data products, query latency is absolutely important. Data latency is becoming more and more important.
Yeah, I'm also thinking that if I look at B2B applications, some are data driven to an incredible degree. Like you can think about Salesforce, and we use HubSpot. I'm not super happy with HubSpot, but they have all those really good reporting capabilities built into the product. And then you look at some other SaaS products, and you barely have any metrics it all essentially. Like, and you can think about you think like I'm a Google Apps user as a B2B customer, as my company is. I'm using trying to think Pulumi. I'm using like there's just all those products, Excalibur, Figma, all those things, and one may think like they probably could have had a lot more data-driven insights in the product. Do you have insight on what how does the wave move between like the early builders of data products and kind of the trailing?
Yeah, that's a great question. What I typically see is that, we call them digital natives. The digital natives, they embrace it so early in their life that right from the get go, they're thinking, this is my SaaS product and this is how I'm going to give data and data driven insights to my users. And typically, these digital natives are born that way. They're thinking that way. Like you're thinking about it already, right? They're already thinking that way. How do I give this insight to my users? And then the hard part is if you haven't been thinking that way from the beginning, trying to bring it in later is not easy. And this is where it comes into, data products. One of the big differences from what happened in the past was, in the past it was analysts building reports, and there was a certain way that you interacted with it. You said, oh, tell me what is the data, tell me what questions do you want to ask, and then a team went off, came up with some data model, came up with some data pipeline, spent 6 months building it, and at the end of it they could produce this one report for you. The thing is, digital natives think differently, and for data products it's developers, and developers don't operate this way anymore. They iterate fast, they want to experiment a lot. Every day they want to ask a different question, and to do that you can't operate in that old world. You have to say developers, they do things differently. And this is where not only do they want to onboard these random data sets all of a sudden, what if I could ask this question out of that data? It's a spark of innovation.
Yeah,
And this is where most data teams, I think, get stuck, because they're trying to do the old world and trying to build that for
yeah.
developers and the data products, and it doesn't work.
And
Everything.
you're spot on that the interface in between is so painful. So a while back, we interviewed the leader of the growth team at Confluent, and she like her team moves like crazy. They're doing like 4 to 7 experiments every week. As you said, like they have ideas, they get the data, they run something, they may hack stuff together just to prove a point. Essentially, the product will arrive later. And she had this very specific list of asks that, because it was locked in a data warehouse which had no real connectivity to her actual product, she couldn't answer it. Like, or she could answer it by going to the data warehouse, copying things into CSV, and pushing it into a database that the product actually runs on, which didn't look 100% right to anyone involved in that process.
Exactly. That is so true. And, I go back to this story of, again, our founders came from Facebook. So this is a very familiar story, but people like to think that that like button of Facebook's was built in a day. That's the story that's been told externally. But the real story, it's not that they had these crazy smart engineers. They did, but it's not that. It's more than that. It's the whole team coming together, which is the real story is that was one out of 1,000 experiments the growth team did, over a 2 month period. And this was the one that stuck. And why could they do this experiment? Because they had this indexing system on the back end where somebody came up with an idea and they could say, great, throw that new data in, build this new UI, release it in a day, see what happens. And I bet if a PM like me was involved and we didn't have an indexing system, I would be sitting there saying, what's the ROI?
Yeah,
You know, like,
absolutely.
really? It's going to take me 6 months to build a pipeline just to prove this one point. No way,
Yeah,
this is not going to happen.
and you really see that growth teams basically first year they shave off a bunch of low-hanging fruit, and then the second year, if there's no investment in the infrastructure, everyone's like, "Ah, now what? We're done with low-hanging fruit. We went from 7 experiments a day to two every 8 months."
Exactly. And this is why when you talk to data teams, there are interesting answers. If you talk to data teams who support developers or they don't support developers. So
Yeah.
the ones that do support developers will tell you they're drowning in tickets. The shape of the data is constantly changing. The type of query is constantly changing. And it's almost impossible for them to keep up with that. And the only way, this is why, our whole philosophy is the only way is to embrace that change and say, hey, data model flexibility is key for data products because the shape of the data is constantly going to change on you, and query flexibility is key for data products because developers, they're going to ask for new types of queries every day. Just embrace it.
Yes, and I think one of the big questions that keep coming up is that can I build those data products on my existing data warehouse?
Hmm.
Because the data is already there. I don't have to worry about how do I pipe it in new directions that we have never done before. Or is it literal? Do I have to bring in a new tool? Because the cost of a new tool is non-trivial. So people really need to feel like they did the right choice there.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. I think there's a lot of confusion around what is the right tool for the job. Like, first of all, what is the job, right? So even
Yeah.
understanding data products and the constraints around data products is so important. But then, right tool for the job, it's very simple in my mind. If you think about it, there are, again, as a database, I think very database like, but as a database, the two things that matter most is how do you write the data and how do you read the data, right?
Database only has two jobs. Should be easy, right?
So, how efficiently do you do those two things is the only question you should be asking for each job. And what is a warehouse built for? A warehouse is built for writing data infrequently and reading data infrequently. And if you do that for reports, for analysts building reports, data is updated, once in a week, once in a day at best. It's infrequent updates, and that's great. And the analyst is querying it once in a day, once in a week, once in a month, infrequent reads. So a warehouse is really optimized for that. And they've done some great optimizations for that, for infrequent writes and infrequent reads. However, you come to this new world of data products, and like we said, data is getting updated all the time. So it's getting updated every second, every minute. And the reads, the queries are coming in all the time. It's developers, it's your users, it's high QPS. So there's a lot of reads coming in. And this is where I think the compute efficiency matters. I talk to a lot of people who tell me their warehouse compute bill is through the roof, it's on fire. And that's a good signal. The two signals to look for, if you want to find out if you have the right tool for the job. One is,
Your costs are reasonable.
yeah, is your cost reasonable, right? Like if your cost is becoming unreasonable, maybe you're doing something off. And the second is your warehouse always on? Because warehouses are not meant to be always on. They're meant to be, I mean, Snowflake did a great job of like on demand usage. They have these virtual warehouses, you spin it up, do your analytics, spin it down. That's the whole point of it. Data products, they're always on because they're programmatic access, they're not human access. So where does the inefficiency come in? On the right path, the inefficiency comes in on the warehouse because it's constantly having to do these updates and then merge the data. The way they do the merges is super inefficient if you're going to do frequent updates.
Yeah,
And
I
for
was saying it's actually super efficient, but it's efficient for batches.
batches, exactly. If you're loading it in every night, it's the most efficient way to do. But if you start doing it every few minutes, it's going to cost you a lot because that's not what it's designed for. So if you're doing frequent updates to your data, you're probably burning a bunch of compute. And on the other side, what about data retrieval? Well, think about how analyst reports look. It's like, oh, compare year over year, or give me the average sales price. For all of those things, you have to scan every record. And you come from databases, so you'll understand this. Scanning is very efficient if it's like you need to calculate an average, you go top to bottom. It's the most efficient thing you can do. But if I ask you, tell me everything you know about Gwen,
It's all slicing and dicing, right?
yeah, it's the worst thing you can do because now you're just spending a lot of compute scanning through your data for every single answer, which is why it becomes too slow and too expensive.
Yeah, and
And I,
I think you hit the nail on the head with the expense almost being like this canary in a gold mine. I think this morning I read through. I have a lot of data news groups, obviously, and someone shared a hot tip that if they are doing very frequent updates for their data warehouse, you will end up spending a lot more money. And the hot tip was batch your updates. And everyone who used data warehouses in the past was like, yeah, I mean, that's kind of how life was meant to be. And I also remember it's a kind of, I hope it's no longer the case, but a bunch of years back, we were doing, using a cloud provider data warehouse, and the query took a lot of money. It was fast, but it took a lot of money. And which is like, I think people don't have the right instinct. They expect that if they do something wrong, the query will be slow. Guys, in the cloud, it will never be slow. It will just be expensive. They will throw every CPU on that.
yeah,
And then we discovered that it was not using, either not using partitioning correctly or not using indexing correctly. And after we talked to support, it's like they said, "Oh yeah, it's a bug." But then
mhm,
we're like, "What is the incentive of the cloud provider to ever fix this bug?"
exactly.
Because that was a bit concerning when the incentives of the vendor and the user are not deeply aligned, right?
Exactly. Yeah. They all just, brute force their way through it, right? You can brute force your way, throw a bunch of compute at it, throw money at the problem, and it's just very inefficient. You still are doing the same job, but it's so inefficient. And this is why your compute bill goes through the roof. And this is why, when we built Rockset, we had to think completely differently. And again, I think a lot of the indexing knowledge that our team had from Facebook came into play here, where we said, look, we have to make it super efficient for frequent updates. And I mean, you come from the Kafka world. I like to joke that they're no longer data streams, now they're data torrents. Because I see like 5-6 terabytes a day. That's a lot of data coming in.
Yeah,
So
but this is like at the very high end, right? This is not that common.
you won't believe how common it's become, Gwen. I'm seeing that more and more frequently these days. I'm like, how much data per day? 5 to 6 terabytes. Time series data, especially, it's a lot. Um, but that was our whole thesis behind Rockset. Like the converged index has to be so efficient that taking a lot of high volume writes and updating a single field in place should be incredibly efficient. That's what it's designed to do. It's designed to take a lot of high volume writes, high volume updates in place, because we just build the index which is mutable at the field level, and it's meant for taking a lot of updates. And then on the retrieval, the query path, again, the more selective your query, the faster and cheaper it becomes. Because again, think of an encyclopedia with an index versus reading a novel.
Yeah.
Right? You just go say, okay, it's on page number 3, 4, and 10. So you just go straight to that and go pick the data. So we're not scanning. It's not like we scan more efficiently than a warehouse. No, no,
Yeah.
no. We actually avoid scanning 90% of the times, which is why we come back that
So
fast.
I think if I would go back to how to build a data product, I would say maybe you can start like a POC on your existing data warehouse just to make sure that you have something that actually finds either internal or external kind of product user fit. But the moment you actually need to use it constantly, fresh data 24/7 production use, you have to migrate away because you need to get your cost under control.
No, I'm actually going to say even something stronger. I'm saying, especially for the prototyping phase when you don't know what data you need, you don't know what queries you need, the warehouse will slow you down because they're forcing you to structure your data. It's not going to be what you need. So, especially for the
Okay, but
prototyping
this is
phase,
only possible if I'm not going to actually try to run and install my own database, right? Like if I have to run install my own analytics database, I would not do it until I have a use case. I won't even have the budget to install and run my own probably.
totally agree. And this is why, it takes us back to the second half of your conversation that you talked about. Getting started has to be easy. If you have to download, install a database and you have to figure out master nodes, controller nodes, provisioning.
Even how which machine in the cloud do I put my Docker container? How do I tighten my CI/CD? How do I upgrade? Like
Yeah,
yeah,
that is just too much. So yeah, I'm with you on that. This is why, I was telling you this earlier. When I joined Rockset, my only question was, please tell me we're building a SaaS only database. And the minute, Dhruv and Venkat said yes, I was like, where do I sign? So this is the beauty of it. On Rockset, you can start with $9 a month. Like you don't have to spin up a single thing. It's completely SaaS. You just log in, you can pay as little as $9 a month, or there's even a free tier. If you don't even want to do that, there's a free, forever free tier. And all you do is you start throwing data at it and you start writing your queries. You never have to think about what nodes, what Docker container, what install, nothing. So when it becomes SaaS, it's as simple as a data API. And this is what, again, developers need for prototyping. Oh, maybe I want to try that data set. Okay, that's in within like 20 minutes, start writing your queries. Maybe I want to try this new data set. No data pipeline to build, no data modeling. You just point us at your data, you start writing your queries. And this is the beauty of SaaS. This can only be done in SaaS if it's
but in
delivered.
order to create the user experience to be so easy, it just sounds like you had a bunch of quite daunting challenges. Like you just said, like point me at your data.
Mhm.
But hey, my data is in my VPC. I don't want you to get pointed to my data. It's kind of sensitive. So, how did you overcome all those things essentially? Like,
Yeah.
what were the big challenges, I guess, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, the point me at your data part, interestingly, people have only, one or two fields that are sensitive. Oftentimes, the entire data set is not that sensitive. So we very early on introduced things like data masking. So there's transformations that you can do as the data comes in. So it's just one
Oh,
SQL.
yeah, this is so critical, right? PCI, PP, yeah, privacy, all those things.
Exactly. So we said, hey, point us to your data, give us read permission to your data. That's all we need. We will ingest it, we will index it. But on the way in, you can also transform it. So you can write one SQL query and you can say, drop these fields, mask those fields, turn the integer into something else. Like you can do all those transformations. And the big
So,
one
your
is,
product is very much self serve, right?
yes, it absolutely is. It's meant for
So if a
developers.
user kind of points you at their database, writes some transformations, and there is no data coming through, did you have to build in some kind of support experience into the product?
Yeah, we have in-app chat. So we have, support chat right there inside the product so people can chat and they'll actually get one of our engineers. So they really love it. Our engineers like to do it. We
Seriously, your engineers love going on the support chat?
They
Good
love it.
hiring.
They absolutely do because it builds so much customer empathy. Now they know the exact things that customers are actually dealing with. And we have a rotation. So it's not like you have to do it all the time. You only have that for a week. We jokingly call it puppy duty internally, just
How
like
could you do?
so you get the puppy only for a week, in the year. And it's a really fun puppy because you get to actually work directly with your customers who are using your product. And it's the
And
best.
this is separate from operational on call, which is just
That's all.
about keeping.
It's all separate. Yeah. This is just the in product chat. Somebody's trying to write a particular SQL statement and wants to ask a question, or somebody's trying to debug something. And by the way, it's interesting. Again, I'm just like in complete awe of our engineering team, but we have not had those kinds of challenges where I pointed at the data and I don't see the data flowing. Those are not the
Seriously,
kind of questions we get. No, we just
you
don't.
won't believe. At some point I'll have to compare notes because you won't believe how hard it sometimes is was at Confluent because some customers use, software defined networks, and the person who needs the data is not always the person who really understands how is the network configured, how to test if it's working. Like you give them instructions on how to configure things, but they give it to someone else. Someone else says it's done. They don't have a great way to say no, it's not.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
we know. Like I wouldn't say that it was a ton, but it was very painful just because of the number of people each seeing one side of the puzzle, I would say.
And I think this is again going back to us really saying we're going to be SaaS only and just keep it simple, right? Because once you keep it SaaS only, now all we need is a way to access that external system. And we have a very simple set of things for Kafka too. Like we have a great Kafka connector, and all we need is just give us read permission to your Kafka topic, give us a name of your topic. Same thing, we do this for DynamoDB. Just give us read permission to your DynamoDB table through an IAM role, and then give us the name of your DynamoDB table. And that's it. And it's meant to be, even if you're not a data engineer, you're just a developer, you should be able to do it. That was our whole goal. And
Yeah.
speaking of SaaS, you can actually set usage metrics, you can measure time to first query. So we have
Mm.
an internal metric which is time to first query should be less than 5 minutes. And that is true. Like we actually measure it and we make sure that if a new user starts using Rockset, within first 5 minutes, they can write their first SQL query on their own data set.
The way life should be very, very kind of product led, and it's not even just product led growth, it's product led training, support, all those things. And I think for you this is kind of like a big differentiator. Like nobody else with a similar product is so deeply invested in the SaaS experience, I
Yes,
would say.
yes. I think this is where SaaS makes such a big difference, like especially for infrastructure companies. If you are delivering your software as SaaS and you make a commitment to that, then everything you do, it forces you to be simple. It forces you to just put the user experience first. There are no band-aids. There's no, oh, maybe they can run this script and do this thing on the side. There's no escape
Yeah, it's just the user and the product, and
exactly.
maybe the chat.
Exactly. And you have to keep it dead simple. You have to make it, like this like developer first experience. And that's why again, SaaS is not just, I think, a method of delivery, it's a religion. Like once you buy into that religion, everything around it comes together.
Yeah, I would say it's just a go-to market, right? Like it defines your entire business strategy. And I think that's why I'm always worried when people do some on-prem, some SaaS, which admittedly Confluent did, but
It's
let's say
hard.
that it had a good excuse of being in a transition period.
Yeah.
I think today it's just choosing to build almost two different businesses at the same time, which seems incredibly challenging. And
Yeah.
I also think I really love is the aligned incentives, right? Like you kind of touched on that. Like if the customer is successful, you are successful. Like if they can get going in 5 minutes, you will have a successful SaaS business. If they don't, you will not. So I guess you had to build a lot of things like usage-based billing into that, and
Exactly. Yeah. Usage based billing, like everything that we had to think about from day one was different. I think we had said, oh, we're just going to go like deploy this with a few design partners, like a large JP Morgan Chase or whatnot. And then said, now how do we go to hundreds of users? It would have been a completely different experience. But we chose not to do that. And we said, from day one, we're going to be developer first. We're going to have a free trial experience. We're going to have a free tier, forever free tier. And we're going to make it something that hundreds of people can try. We still have hundreds of people doing trials every month. We still have so many credit card swipes that I think our team is very proud of. Zero touch credit card swipes. Nobody.
I love that the team is proud of not charging money.
zero touch, but it's no, we charge them because
Oh,
they're swiping the card.
oh, zero touch, as in there's no salesperson in the
There's no
process.
salesperson, there's no support chat, and a support chat is counted as a touch. There's no email interaction. There's been zero touch. There's been zero email, zero support chat, zero sales interaction, and they have done their purchase on Rockset, and we are super thrilled about
And
that.
you have all the usage analytics driven for Rockset by Rockset.
Exactly. And it's, when I say religion, I also mean, I think the company has to buy into it. It's not just a product thing. Like the sales team has to buy into it, right? Our
Oh yeah,
sales team is amazing at recognizing these, and they understand when they see the trials and the usage, they understand that this is a developer persona. Let's not go bug them. Let's just help them be successful with the product. And then we know they'll fall in love with the product. They will work with the sales team to expand usage. And we see that over and over again, where they might just start with a credit card swipe. As their usage expands, they'll come to the sales team and say, "Can I buy you through AWS Marketplace or something like that?" And they'll do that interaction.
can
But
I get a discount?
exactly, right? So sales is there to help them. We have a fantastic sales team, but they also have become really smart about knowing which is the developer first experience versus which is the buyer first experience. And you got to give the developers and the buyers what they want.
Yeah, this is a fantastic insight. Shruti, thank you so much for all the insights on both data products and software as a service. It's been an incredibly educational conversation.
Thank you so much, Gwen. This was so much fun. I think you asked the best questions, and I might have gotten really passionate along the way because these are all topics super close to my heart.
I think we both did.